you guys for coming. I want to welcome you. This is Kelly. She's coming to coming to talk with us tonight. For those who do not know me, my name is Ronnie. I am a donor egg mom in waiting, and what that just means is, in order the best chances for me to conceive, my doctor told me to use donor eggs, and so that's what I did. I went and got a donor. I have recently, well, you guys know, I documented my fourth transfer here, and I did get pregnant, but it resulted in a chemical pregnancy. So I am on the road again for transfer number 5. I just started really just coming to the grips of doing it. I started over. And usually when that happens, I just kind of take a little break. But I have not given up. I'm just, it takes a lot. So mentally, I am just getting myself prepared for next steps. But that is a little bit about me. But today we have Kelly, who also, I met Kelly in Black Wise TTC is a group on Facebook. And somehow we all meshed together. I think somebody asked for just a little like private more chat, like we could all talk. And Kelly was like, we all joined together. And so I, again, was the privilege to be with Kelly in real time. So no matter how she tells the story, and it seems simple, it was not. We had to fight with her every single day. She was like, that's it. They don't tell me wait another 2 days. I'm not going back. I was like, you will go back. So you want to get started? I know you and your husband tried for a while, and then you decided and walk us through the steps of what you guys were experiencing and what made you turn to IVF, or what made us drag you into doing IVF.
That's true. That is exactly how it happened. Well, let's see. I like to say it started because I knew I wanted. Well, actually, I didn't know. I had been going back and forth from whether I wanted to be a mom or not. Just like giving up my freedom, all the things, all the normal things you think. I finally decided I did. Went to the doctor just to get checked out. Found out I had fibroids, and my doctor that I had at the time. Her cousin worked the front desk, but her cousin likes to joke that she's like surgery happy. And I think that's true because in like a dummy, I didn't do so. This is I bring this up because please don't let somebody just tell you to do one thing over the other. Because she was like, yeah, you need to get an open myomectomy, and I'm like, sure, that sounds.
The front desk says she's
So
gonna.
yeah,
The front desk
I get
lady.
the open myomectomy.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the front desk lady is the doctor's cousin. I know.
Okay.
They was a black group, so we talked a lot. At any rate, but I did do it, and I wish I would have done like a when they go in through with the scope and something that's not such a big surgery because it delayed me and pushed me back like 6 to 8 months. However, then we eventually got started. We kind of then went back and round because I think he was worried and he was scared, and that was its own thing, trying to get him to get out of his own brain about being a parent. So I feel like we were working together and completely separate all at the same time.
Right.
So that was a problem. Um, but we got through it, and that didn't take very long because we were still like I wasn't on birth control. We were still doing it. It just wasn't as aggressive. But then we eventually started being aggressive, like all the things. I was charting, I was taking my temperatures, I was writing calendars, I was all the things you could think about. I was doing Geritol. Nothing was working. Not a one thing was working. Anything that somebody has ever suggested to you, I've done. And also, as Sharonda mentioned, I also gave up on stuff easily too because I would get frustrated. If it didn't work after a month, I was like, just forget the whole thing. I don't even want to do it anymore. And then I was having so many issues with the referrals because they give me a referral, but they wouldn't actually give it to me. and I'd have to call the doctor's office like 5 or 6 times to get the referrals. And it was an absurd amount of time wasted on me waiting for referrals for stuff.
Right.
But eventually I got there. We got there. And because my doctor was like, well, it's been a year and you getting up there. I was like in my early 30s. I wasn't I wasn't up there, but enough that it was like you've been trying for long enough that let's send you to the fertility specialist, and at least they can check you out, and see what's going on. The end result of seeing what was going on was they still had no idea what was wrong with me. Like to this day, I still have no idea why I have fertility issues. Not one clue. Because my AMH was okay. Like
Right.
all my numbers they were
Right.
fine. They weren't like anything to write home to, and they weren't great, but they weren't terrible.
Correct.
And then my tubes initially they thought was blocked. Um, but then that once they did the oh gosh, why can't my brain think of what it is when they shoot the blue dye through your tubes to see if they're actually open.
HSG.
Yes, that
Yes.
actually that actually unclogged whatever they thought was clogged. I don't know what it was, but it was fine. It was open after that. Still, I couldn't get pregnant. So instead of doing all the in between stuff, we just went straight to IVF. I didn't do IUI. I didn't, and we didn't do anything. Just went straight to IVF.
And how old were you at the time you started fertility treatments?
33.
33.
33. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to highlight that because you were 33, numbers came back good. Really, they can't see anything that you should not get pregnant. So what we just have is a case of unexplained infertility. Um, and most of the women that I bring on the panel are over 35. And um, it is important to say that younger women do have uh, fertility issues even at a younger age. And I do remember your numbers, and she was correct. They weren't terrible. They were borderline. So meaning
Right.
if she'd have tried like in 2 years, she would like her FSH was a little bit elevated. Her AMH was decent. All her numbers, even everything looked good. And it was like technically really just like if in 2 more years, she definitely would have needed IVF. Um, because her body was showing signals of you may need some help.
Right.
So even at 33, if you're finding yourself and you don't know, um, it's not happening, going to see a fertility specialist may be just, especially your insurance kind of covers those kind of things
Right.
anyway, at least the first part. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's also what I tell everybody too. Like all my nieces and especially in my family, we don't talk enough
Right.
about any of this stuff. Like when I had found out I had fibroids, I told my grandma because I tell everything. I'm telling all the business. And my grandma was like, "Oh yeah, I had those too, ma'am."
You wanted to say something?
And I knew she had infertility issues because she had several miscarriages. Like this is
Okay.
this is a family, like an open family secret. We don't talk about it, but we knew. And I mean, this was in the 70s at this point. She
Right.
was older too, because my mom was like 18 by the time she stopped trying. Um, but my point being is that I don't think there was enough information at that point. But we also just don't share. So that's why I'm very adamant about talking to everybody about it now.
Let me ask you this and tell me what you think because I had the same issue. Like I knew people in my family that had miscarriages, but was it presented to you as not is you're going through infertility? It was a situation of, well, that's just what happens. Like you
Hmm.
just miss like it's normal. And so you don't for me, I didn't think anything of it until I was trying and I
Hmm.
said, wait, then I'm starting to hear, then it's starting to connect the
Yep.
dots. Your aunt had, um, now I'm gonna call it that was not talking about some babies in the tube. That's what I knew the whole time. I was like, not what it is. It's a topic pregnancy, but I just knew it as a babies in the tubes. Okay. That's all I knew. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was like, yeah, she had twins. They were in her tubes. She had babies in her tubes and she got rid of them. She can't have kids anymore. Oh, okay. Not, that's, what's is the cause of it. My aunt, my mom's sister, she also had miscarriages too as well. Didn't talk about them. We found out later she had miscarriages, like 3 or 4, and it was just presented as, well, she has kids, and so I guess that erased the fact that they had it. My mom didn't have any issues at all. She got pregnant twice. She got 2 kids. I have relatives as well that had miscarriages, but nothing was presented. And I wanted to ask you, was anything presented like you need to go to a doctor and find out why these things are happening?
Not even a little bit.
Right.
The only reason it has ever come up is because my grandfather he's my mom's stepdad. He doesn't have any kids. So that's it. Like we have had conversation about like, oh yeah, they did try and
Right.
it didn't succeed and yada yada yada.
Right.
Like she actually made it to month 9 and had a stillborn.
Oh my gosh.
So I mean we know that. But it's not like, oh yeah, that happened to your grandma. This is why. That's that. No, no,
Right.
no.
Right.
We still don't talk about it. And I don't ask my grandma because I feel like at this point I'm just figuring everything out by myself.
So naturally, your grandmother is not DNA related to you.
No, she is. My
Oh,
grandfather isn't, but my grandma is.
okay. So she did have kids.
Yeah, my
Okay.
mom is my grandma's
Okay. Okay. Okay.
biological daughter.
Okay.
That just by happenstance, and she had my mom first. I don't know if she had miscarriages before my mom. All the
Right.
miscarriages that I know happened with her current
After.
husband.
Got you. Okay. Okay. I got you. I got what you're saying. So we could probably say that maybe we had some male factor infertility,
Could
possibly,
be
because you said he didn't have any kids.
right. He has no kids, so it could
Oh
be
wow.
both of them honestly. Because at the end of the day, she was still having
Miscarriages too as well.
and
This is true.
stillbirths and
Right.
So I mean, and the thing is, all her siblings have. She comes from a family of like 12 or 13. I mean,
Right.
they all have a bunch of kids. So I also think it's one of those. I'm I'm an outsider. Like
Yeah.
everybody else, she's the only one with 1 kid.
Wow.
So I'm sure it's just hard to talk about.
Yeah.
But and my mom didn't seem to have any issues, but she's also hasn't she talks more than my grandma, but she hasn't told me anything about miscarriages or anything.
Miscarriages.
So I don't think she had any issues. I think it just skipped over to me.
Well, sometimes we're blessed. Sometimes, I was like, I don't win the lottery, but I win this.
Right. Right. So yeah, it's been it. I will say this though about, and I know I'm not at the end of my journey yet, but I will say just going through this has been very eye-opening,
Okay.
and it, for one, it has now made me have more conversations with people that I was not having before. Like these are not things that I thought to talk to people
Right.
about. Like even my friend. My friend is um with 37, 38. Lord, how old am I? 38. And so I told her, and she's been talking about it too, but I do the same thing with my niece. I'm like, y'all need to just go get checked out, get your numbers checked, see what's going on. Like, because I know an absurd amount of people who have to go through infertility or some
Right.
type of, fertility type services. And when I tell you an absurd amount of people, like, I have at least 3 friends around me who I know have done fertility treatment or who have histories of miscarriages or whose kids have genetic disorder or something.
Right.
So I feel like we need to be having more open conversations about stuff like this so we know to look out for it,
Right.
which delays us, I think, when we don't talk about it. Because had I not been trying to do it, I wouldn't know. Like if
Right.
let's say I got married at 40 and I was like, I got time.
Right. Right. We realize that maybe we don't have time.
Right. So, yeah, so back to the We got the fertilities. We got everything started. We got my numbers going. We were ready. I actually got a decent amount of eggs. Again, nothing spectacular, but enough to get me going. Some of them were um, good grade. Some of them were not. Again, sure, no, I was like, it's just these are terrible eggs. Just throw the whole thing away every time. This was me every month. But still, we had something to work with. But then we got to the transfer portion of it, and that's where the struggle came back because my body was not responding at all.
Right.
It to me, it was like this is where I'm finding out the issue is. It like whatever they were trying to increase my estrogen, but then my estrogen was increasing way too high. Like
Right.
then they couldn't bring it down. So then 1 month was just a wasted month because they couldn't get my estrogen down. The next
Right.
month, because I had frozen eggs, embryos at this point. I had frozen embryos at this point, and that's what we were planning on using because they realized that my body was not working in alignment. Like it wasn't ovulating in the time period it was supposed to ovulate for an embryo to work. I think that's probably honestly what the fertility issues are related to. But so second month came around. She tried something different. However, my estrogen levels were still too high. And then at that point, they decided we should probably try for a live um, one because I think before they thought with the frozen ones they were going to be able to control it more. They couldn't.
Right.
My body was like, I'm gonna do whatever I want to do.
Right.
Um, but the problem was is that my embryos were not doing what they wanted to do. They were not
Right.
developing at an appropriate rate for me to do live embryos. That's why we froze them because they wanted to give them more time to develop. However, we tried it anyway because we didn't really have a choice. It was either we didn't have a choice. And I did. I actually got pregnant, but it was a chemical pregnancy. But at least I knew my body could get pregnant. Like that was a good sign
Right.
to me. Second, well, technically third month trying, same thing happened. We couldn't use none of those frozen embryos. It just wasn't happening. And my doctor, who by happenstance is also a IVF patient, which made this experience 10 times better because she was like, let's just try all the things.
Right.
It
Right.
may
Right. Right.
may
Right.
work, may not work, but I've been in your position. So, I know how it feels. So, those embryos that month were not great. They were not great at all. And she was like, listen, I don't know what's happening with your body, but how about we just transfer two embryos? They're both just average, so it's all possible it might not work, but we're gonna give it a try. And this month, the last couple months, I had done like acupuncture and we did some special stuff with the sperm and like all the things. And this month, I was like, I'm just here. I'm just here.
Right.
I cannot put this much energy into this to be disappointed again because I am exhausted by this entire process. So if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I don't know if that and the Valium helped, but I was very relaxed and it worked. It worked. And by the time I got my beta numbers back, they were high. They were very
Right.
high. I was like, am I having twins? That's how high they were. Um, but that pregnancy was an easy pregnancy, but it was not without lots of anxiety because every day I was afraid something was gonna go wrong. Just I was convinced my body was not meant like it didn't want to corroborate. It wasn't corroborating at first. Why would it corroborate for the next 9 months?
Right. So walk
But
us
it
through.
did.
So tell us about your emotions. How did you feel when, you've done all this work, you ready to give up every 5 minutes, and I really mean every 5 minutes she was ready to give up,
Every
y'all.
5 minutes.
Every 5 minutes she was ready to get up. We were so tired of her. And then when she had the chemical, she was like, you know what? It's just I just done. We're like, okay, it's your first time, like. let's see what it says. Let's see what the doctor says. Let's just, regroup. And she was like, well, I just know if it don't work this time, I'm done. It's literally every 5 minutes she was done. We're like, okay, that's fine. So it works. Pregnancy test. How are you feeling? Tell us your emotions of, because I know like you got the positive pregnancy the first time, and then like the second time you get it again.
So I mean, I was happy. I was, but again, I I just it wasn't that I was convinced it wasn't going to work. It was just nervousness for a
Right.
very, very long time. Like I was excited that it worked, and the high numbers were a good sign to me. But I mean, what does that mean? Like people's data numbers drop every day,
Right.
and so it was just a lot of worry. I mean, honestly, it was a lot of worry. But I will say this because at that time I was also having lots of issues with depression.
Okay.
So trying to do infertility while in the midst of depression is also not fun. It's not fun. I would advise working on the depression first and working through that. But I was at the end of it. Like I had done lots of work. I had done all the work. But y'all got all the midst of the depression, which is why I was ready to give up every day. But by that point, I had done so much work that I think I was better equipped to handle it. Plus, I was still in therapy,
Right.
and she was able to help me process through some of those emotions and just being worried all the time, and like talking to myself, being like, "Your body's going to do what it's supposed to do. It'll
Right.
be fine." Like had to do a lot of positive self-talk for sure. And that helped substantially. It did. And I think that at that point I had something to focus on. Like I had to focus on creating this little person that I didn't have time to focus on being depressed anymore. So mostly I was anxious all the time.
Now, what? Because you didn't test your embryos,
I
and I
didn't.
know that. What was the decision of you guys not testing embryos?
Well, so we had both done a 23andMe for totally separate reasons, nothing to do with this. But they do like a baseline genetic workup. Neither one of us had the same genetic variants of anything. Like we didn't have anything that was similar. So I was like, okay, I'm like, there's nothing that should come back, and I'm sure it'll be fine otherwise. So it
Okay.
didn't serve any purpose for us to test the embryos. However, I was very, very, very wrong, very wrong,
Okay.
because when my son was born, we found out he doesn't have a full diagnosis of cystic fibrosis. He has something called cystic fibrosis metabolic disorder.
Okay.
And the only reason is because he has two variants, meaning he got it one from both of us. But
Okay.
he doesn't really have a lot of symptoms. So like his because my variant is so abnormal, his symptoms are mild.
Okay.
So they haven't given him a full diagnosis. But the reality is that now we know we both have a cystic fibrosis gene, and any child that we have thereafter has the potential to have cystic fibrosis.
So
So
walk
while
us through what
he is
cystic.
mild,
So walk us through what
okay,
cystic fibrosis is.
cystic fibrosis is complicated because it's a number of things. So it can cause respiratory issues that can cause ongoing effects to the lungs and make it so that your lungs stop working incorrectly. It can also cause gastrointestinal issues, sodium problems where your body is producing too much sodium. Um, so it, and all of that affects like your kidneys and all kind of other things going on in your body. His variants are more likely to cause respiratory issues.
Okay.
So he has to do like breathing treatments every day. But again, for the most part, he's other than that, he's fine. He's congested all the time. but lots of snot, which is also a symptom. It causes a lot of mucus to build up, which can go into the lungs, and that leads to some of the respiratory issues. So they try to just make sure that they're keeping any mucus out of there, and he's been okay.
Okay.
However, it could be worse because there are lots of other kids who are in hospital for 2 weeks at a time, who are need to take nebulizers and like all kind of things. They're taking medication because what's happening is they're sweating out a lot of sodium. So even though they're producing a lot of sodium, they're sweating it all out. And so
Got
then
you.
they need to like get that sodium back into their body. And they are literally taking salt pills, basically, for little people. Um, so yeah, that is that those are the things you need to look out for. But because of that, and thank goodness now they've done so much research on cystic fibrosis that whereas 20 years ago the life expectancy was somewhere like 30, and now with all the medications and the treatments and stuff, it's up to about a regular life expectancy.
I got you.
But with that being said, any other kid we have, we while he's doing amazing,
Right.
you don't know what it might look like with another child. So we decided we were going to go ahead and test embryos this time because we are in the process of trying for a second child. And that process has been, I'm not going to lie to you, Sharonda, I didn't gave up on that like 3 times too.
I wouldn't expect anything less, okay?
My doctor called me and was like, let's talk. How are you?
How are you? You ready
I
to quit
get it. I
today, or are we still where are we at? Okay, we're still going today. All right, that's good. It's great to hear.
She was like, I get
um,
it. We'll get
Before
through
we
it.
get into your stems for your new one, I want to talk to you because you talked about depression. Did you
Mhm.
experience, or did it come back after birth? You finally have your son. Now you found out he's here and he's got some ailments. He got some issues, health issues. Um, did it trigger back any of your depression and anxiety again? And what did you do if you did to mitigate it?
Okay, the depression, I no. Sadness about all this because it was rough those first. He was not like he was so congested that I had to let him like sleep on my chest. Like it was a lot. But I feel like I've learned to deal with the depression, but it's coming back brand new as full blown anxiety.
Right.
So whereas I've always had like it's anxiety's always been over here somewhere, and it usually leads to depression. It is like every worry in the world, like absurd worries. And at first I was handling it well. And then time kept going. I am concerned about everything. So at this point, I had to go back to therapy. I literally started therapy 2 months ago. I went back to my therapist, and we are working on lots of cognitive behavioral things like self-talk and all the things. Because I have been having a bit of a hard time. And I don't know if it's with the onset of the testing the embryos. I've been having a hard time this entire time. I've just been able
Okay.
to manage it.
Okay.
But this might be adding to it.
Okay. So now when you first did your stems and everything, you were 33, and how old are you now?
38 now.
Okay. How do your numbers look compared to 33?
They're not terrible, actually.
Okay, good.
Surprising. I was surprised too when I saw them. I'm like, oh, okay.
Okay, listen, I'm
We're
still
still in
percolating
the
now. Okay, girl. I see you.
Exactly. Because at this point, she wants me to get new embryos because the old ones, her fear is that since we're testing them now, some are going to be abnormal, some are going to
Right.
have cystic fibrosis, and I have nine that are frozen right now. But I feel like she thinks that's not enough at this point because
Right.
we just don't know. And then even though my numbers are looking okay, we know my body don't like to act right. So
Right.
So we just don't know.
Right.
So I'm glad the numbers are not looking terrible since I have to get more embryos.
I think that's fair because, with 9 embryos untested, we statistically we would say about, you know, when you're testing them, we're going to probably lose maybe 4 or 5, you know, and then the chances of them being normal at normal, yeah, then you're left with like maybe three, um,
Right, right.
and so instead of just, I mean, we could take the gamut and try the 3 or whatever you have, but then that puts you maybe another year older. So maybe your numbers do decline. So I would safely say I agree with her getting you to do another egg retrieval, get it out the way. Insurance wise, are they paying for your stuff, your
I get
IVF?
4 a year.
Right. So
Hmm.
IVF, I mean, sorry, insurance is paying for it. I think it would be a different issue if you were paying out of pocket, that you would just say, hey, we just, maybe take a chance. But if you have insurance and it's paying for it, I don't see the harm in getting it done out the way. I mean, you may have a chance of having leftover embryos, but you can always come to my group and donate them.
I've been trying to convince this one. I'm telling you, I'm like, there's so many moms out there,
Shameless plug, you know what I'm saying? So,
and they'll be tested,
we can
so
always
we'll
we can
know.
always donate those bad boys if you want to later on in the time. But we ain't got to talk about it now. We need a baby.
I,
Um, so what issues are you having now? Because I remember you saying, because we kind of don't talk every day, but we kind of do, like, I feel like every 3 month
a
check
check
in. Y'all
in,
doing all
yes.
right out there? And we're like, oh yeah, well, life has happened, and I had all this, and I know you said you had surgeries because you have your own health issues too
Oh
as well.
gosh, yes. Oh gosh. So I didn't forget all about the surgery.
Look, listen. My brain has
So
told me I can't think about all that. I got to move forward. You right.
yes.
You right.
So yeah, that was another delay. So I was planning on trying. Well, I had this really unrealistic, for somebody who's done this already, I've had the most unrealistic time expectations in my head. But to be fair, I also didn't expect to need spinal surgery.
Right.
And I also didn't expect to for this embryo stuff to take so long. Like it is an absurd amount of time. But so we started trying. We did back in February. That's when I first went back to my fertility specialist and told her I wanted to start trying. And I told her about all the things with my son and yada yada yada. That's when we came up with the plan. Come June, let's see. No, no, no. It was much. I have arthritis in my neck. It's called polyradiculopathy. Is really what it is, and it's been getting worse every year because I've not been doing what I'm supposed to do. So I'm doing better now, though, I promise. But around May-ish, April-ish, it started to get worse. It was awful. And I went to an orthopedic, and he was like, "Yeah, no, you don't have a disc anymore. It's gone almost." And so I had to I have a plate in my neck now. They had to do surgery. So that delayed me a little bit. Um yeah, that delayed me just a tiny bit. And when I say tiny bit, I mean that because I promise you I recovered from that quicker than I did that myomectomy, which
Right.
seems so
Right.
strange.
Right.
Seems so strange. But because I was waiting for so much stuff with the genetics and all that other stuff, even though it delayed me, it wasn't like a big lump in the bigger scheme of things. And for the most part, he said I shouldn't have any, since it's all the way up by my neck, I shouldn't have any issues carrying a baby or anything like that. But I'm not gonna pretend like that wasn't scary and
Right.
added
Right.
to the
Right.
anxiety. I mean,
Right.
somebody's cutting into your spine. That is a bit rough. Um, so that happened, and my body's just been falling apart altogether. But outside of that, when we started doing the genetic stuff, it wasn't just the regular genetic stuff that happened. It turned out that when they did the genetic workup, I came back with a whole different gene than my son. And they were like, this is a little weird. We probably need to, what they call is unmasking. So they'll do like this large, they only test for
Right.
certain amounts of variance for certain things. So they found it. But then what happened was they were like, we got to unmask the rest of them and see if you have this gene. And I did. So now, come to find out, I also have the cystic fibrosis, metabolic, blah, 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 blah. And I have to go see a rheumatologist as well.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm like, well, this is interesting because I do sometimes have breathing issues and things like that. And I'm like, okay, I wonder could that explain it? And I feel like they don't have enough research around these variants. So then it also got me to thinking because they constantly say it causes potential fertility issues in males. They say that a lot about cystic fibrosis. And I'm
Right.
like, are you sure it doesn't also cause it in females? You don't know me that. So that came to play because now any child I have is going to have a cystic fibrosis variant, no matter what I do. But it took them a really long time to unveil that, figure that out, see how it meshed with my sons, because they were trying to figure out if I had both of my variants on one chromosome or if it was on two separate ones, and that took a while. And then also, I found out I have GP6 deficiency. Can't remember. It's such, these are just, I'm like, I shouldn't have did this. I should have just been living in this false world. But again, any son that I have is going to always get that
Oh,
because
wow.
of the chromosome that it sits on. So
Okay.
it hasn't bothered him. I haven't noticed any issues, but yes, I got all the stuff. I got everything. Um, but that's where we at. So I still got to go do my own doctor follow-ups and stuff like that. But we still on the road. We now got that done. We sent in our little swabs and blood work, and we just waiting for our probe to come back. And I'm not gonna say we should be good, but at least we done with that part.
Right. And then you'll start your egg retrieval process.
Hmm.
Okay. So what are your thoughts and your feelings about all of this? Um, as I said, she liked to quit a lot. So
A lot.
um
Here's my fear is because remember, my body wasn't acting right with
right.
those frozen embryos. So that was the very first thing I told her. I'm like, listen, now that we're having to test these embryos, we know you're probably going to have to freeze them, and that wasn't working before. So I'm afraid that we're going to have the same issue that we were having previously. And her answer was, well, we learned a lot of new stuff. And they always say the more transfers you do, the more they learn
Right.
about your specific body so they can
Right.
adjust and do all the things. And this has taken forever. And I feel like trying to figure all of that out with my body is also going to take a lot of extra work. Even though they said they've learned new things just in general with science,
Right.
that's my fear. That's my thinking. And I am going to give up 5 times.
Someone asked in the chat, and may you need to rephrase this. Are you willing to say what you need for the
Probe. Uh-huh.
probe? Like how many genetic lines?
Just us. Because my son has it, I just had to swab him, and then me and my husband had to do blood work. But if they weren't able to tell like his genetic makeup, or if they didn't have him, then they asked that you ask your parents to
Okay.
provide some swabs. But that was all they asked for was the two of us and then our parents, if we
Okay.
did not already have my son.
Okay. Okay. To make sure to see where the lines cross for between you two. I
Right.
understand. I understand. I understand. And that's interesting. I mean, people say, and this is why clinics do what's called a baseline genetic testing by law. Listen, we all know that we were here. We are here based on our parents don't know, most of us. So we don't know if our parents had genetic carriers. I think I found out later when I did mine, I was a carrier for something. And then I was talking to my mom, and she was talking about the symptoms about her, and it's something to do with like your glucose and stuff. And she was telling me, and I was like, I got it from you, but I mean, it didn't affect anything because, and that's when I was trying at the time. But they said it really wasn't anything, if my partner didn't have anything, that it would just be something that I would just carry. And then it's a possibility that your child could carry or not. So, that's the importance of why they're doing that, because they don't want to, in a sense, have you have a child with disorders or anything, when sometimes it can be prevented with PGT testing. And then sometimes you have to do what's called PGT-M testing, I believe.
That's what I'm doing. PGT.
Yeah. Where they look at genetic markers to make sure that the embryos, because there's a base that they do just abnormal, normal, the grade. When they take a little biopsy, when they do PGT-M, they basically screen for carriers in that embryo to make sure they don't have them. I guess what you would call maybe a pre-amniocentesis, because that's what they do too as well.
Yeah.
Prior to conception, they would be testing those embryos to make sure they didn't have any specific genetic markers.
Yeah.
Is what they're basically testing for, and it can be expensive too. If
It
your
is
insurance
expensive.
is not. Yeah.
My insurance is not covering it.
Yeah, because they cover PGT testing a lot of times, but sometimes when you need extra, sometimes you have to get referrals. I know she talked about that. Getting referrals, sometimes you have to check your insurance, and they won't let you proceed with IVF or anything without certain testing. And that's what she had to do. She had to go from one specialist to another, basically saying, yes, she cannot get pregnant on her own. And let me ask you this too. We never really talked about it, but how is that feeling? Like, you have to, and I just recently went through that with my FSA. I had an embryo transfer, and I had to give them proof that it was medically necessary to do an embryo transfer, as if I volunteered. I have nothing to do today. I want to have a baby. Let me just do an embryo transfer. I was like, how triggering is this? That you have to go through all these doctors to prove that I want to have a baby,
Yeah. I will say this time around, it was so much easier. Like, I ended up going back to my gynecologist, and I just told her, I was like, listen, my son has this genetic disorder, and I already went through IVF. I need to go back. And she was like, oh, okay, we'll see if the insurance approves it. And I had no problem. I was shocked.
Oh, wow.
Because it is a drastic difference from what happened the first time.
Well, we got the baby. This is the first time. Yes, I'm going to need it again. I know what people say magically, you don't think about it, you're going to get boom pregnant. This is not happening here. We need it again.
Right, exactly. So yeah, that I was honestly shocked. But that first time, it was like, I don't know how many ways I can tell you I can't have a baby. Like, I don't, what do you want me to do? Like, I've been trying. Do you want to see the pills? Do you want to see my house?
Right. Do you want to see my med drawer that I have over here that I take all the time? You want to see my supplements that I take? Would you like to see the ovulation sticks? Would you like to see all the things that I am doing? I am desperately trying here, and nothing is happening. So yeah. I tell people too,
the process to get to it is exhausting.
Yeah. I also said too, the most triggering thing that anybody can ask you at the doctor's office is, when was your last cycle? Please stop asking me that. I don't get one. Because I don't get one.
Oh, Lord.
And then they look at you like, what? I'm like, yeah, some of us don't get
one. The interesting thing is what can be triggering to any, like, you don't know what's going to be triggering until it's triggering.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Bye. Never mind. Sorry. Sorry, I thought he was going to bed. I was trying not to be too loud. But here he comes running. Anyway, I had to realize there are certain things that people say or people do that you just don't know. You really don't know if it's going to be it is going to set you off for like having to answer questions. I was listening to this one girl who said, I'm tired of people asking if I'm going to have another kid because she had two. And I think she went into it telling everyone she wanted to have three kids. And so I guess in everybody else's mind, it's like, oh, but you said you were gonna have the third kid. When are you having this third kid? She said, every time somebody asks me, I get exhausted because I had to do IVF for both of my kids. And this last pregnancy was a struggle. Like it was rough. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So I started thinking about that, like, oh, I guess I didn't think about the fact that obviously, like, don't ask nobody if they're gonna have a baby. That's obviously gonna irritate somebody. But if you've now volunteered to everybody that you want three kids, I feel like we, as even me, like even as somebody who's gone through it, I don't
Right.
necessarily know what might set you off
Right.
because that's your own personal journey. And it's
Right.
so hard. And I feel like we just have to learn how to be more mindful about people's journeys. I think that's really all we can do. And if you do something that's gonna set somebody off, apologize and move on. Don't just keep pushing the subject. Listen, I want to be asked about my period. Please stop.
Well,
Let's
please
move
stop
on.
it right immediately. Um, I want to touch bases with you because your career is dealing with children and different situations. And I know, like we talked about before, we had discussions about co-sleeping and all those different things and all the things that you had saw that you did not want to do,
Girl.
with your son because of the things that you had seen. With those things that triggered your own anxiety after you had him too as well due to your profession.
Yes, for sure. Which is also why I had such a hard time when he couldn't breathe. Because but to your point about co-sleeping, I didn't want to co-sleep at all because I thought it was dangerous. And yet I had to have him like laying certain ways. Sometimes the only way to get him to lay was lay flat on my chest. Even today, he had an issue where I guess he accidentally sat down on the toilet on his little private parts, and the daycare emailed it to me, and I was like, pause, back up. Let's now, what did happen to my baby's private parts? But I'm always on the lookout for any of that. Like I don't trust anybody, and it's sad, but it also adds to my anxiety of like what could happen and all this stuff. Him not gaining weight because of the cystic fibrosis stuff. That adds to my anxiety. It's a lot, and I consider a lot. Like, what is that going to look like with two? And I try to remind myself that the second one won't have cystic fibrosis, but at the end of the day, it's still gonna be a kid, right?
Right, right.
It's still gonna be a kid.
And just to let everybody
So
know, you work in defects, right?
DCFS, I do.
Right,
I work
right.
at
She works in
DCFS.
defects, so she sees a lot of things that
Lots of
missed
things.
things.
Lots of things. So yes, it definitely comes to play in all the things that I do around children and my anxiety. And honestly, my anxiety is a really big thing that I'm working on right now. Because what I also don't want to do is start transferring those anxieties over to my child. So, yeah, this is where we're at right now.
For those of you who are joining us, we have Kelly here. She is talking about her IVF journey. She is on baby number 2. She found out when her son was born that he has basically some
I just tell people cystic fibrosis. It's
cystic fibrosis
easier.
adjacent. You know what I'm saying? He ain't in the neighborhood, but you know what I'm saying? He's right next to it and he could possibly sometime move into the neighborhood. We don't know.
He could.
So we just kind of keep an eye on it. If anybody has any questions, maybe you've done IVF or you're doing that, and what if anything you could I would access, you know, we can do all of the pre-testing, you know, um, there's even one that you do when you're pregnant. Would you suggest doing anything afterwards to test your child for anything? Or would you just, because I'm assuming because you just had the respiratory issues is the reason why they dug a little bit deeper, or did you do some stuff on your own?
No, I would have just assumed he had nasal issues, but he tested. So what happened was that they do the newborn screening and they automatically test for cystic fibrosis.
Okay.
His numbers were so low that he could have missed, they could have completely missed it. The only reason they put it on alert that he might have cystic fibrosis is because they go off of the number of kids that are tested within that day, and the top, I don't know, like 5%, the number with the top 5% of high numbers are the people that they alert. He literally barely made it by the skin of his teeth.
Oh, wow.
Had another baby been born that day that had a higher number than him, we might have not even known today. We might have had no clue and been still trying to figure out why he was congested so much. He gets sick during the winter times, like an absurd amount of times. He was last month was sick every 2 weeks. The last couple of months, so stuff like that, we would have not, we wouldn't have known.
No.
So just by happenstance, we got um, alerted about his numbers because they were so moderate. They were in such a low end. But
I
yeah,
promise you, I see so many God winks in so many of the stories, that I have, and you know, um, we talk about black females and mortality rates and those things, and even just being at the right place at the right time. He could have been born the next day, and you wouldn't have, like you
hmm
said, he wouldn't have may not have made it in the number because there was nothing to indicate that he even possibly had it. So we just thank God for those times. We paid a lot for these babies, which
yes,
is why I say medical intervention because, and even sometimes, I'm getting to the point where, I know some women who just naturally just miscarry all the time, and it's a lot of money of tests and everything spent. But you pay a lot for these children, and listen, we ordered the Be Okay package. Listen, we didn't order all of this in the package. I checked the order; it's wrong.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I want to
It's
ask
been a
you
journey.
this. I'm gonna ask you this, my last two questions, because I do my platform, mostly is for third party reproduction. So when he came out, um, how was your bonding time with him? Did you immediately bond with him? Was there some work to do? Walk us through him being here, new mom.
No, I actually we bonded right away. And I don't, and I know that just because you go through IVF doesn't, I mean, you still have regular body stuff, regular hormonal stuff. Not everybody's going to bond with their baby right away, but I felt like we had just connected so much. Like I had done so much to create this baby. This was my miracle baby that I spent all this time growing and nurturing and listening to his little heartbeat. And so when he came, I cried. I don't cry. Well, I cry now. I'm a big baby, but like as soon as he came out, I cried, and I've been attached to that little boy ever since.
My last question to you is what would you tell a woman who is 33 years old, been trying, and she is not having success with getting pregnant? What would be your advice to her as far as moving forward when everybody around her has told her, baby, it's just in God's timing, go on vacation. You're just thinking about it too hard, girl. You just need to relax. You know what I'm saying?
Oh my God, you just need to relax. I swear. I'm like, I don't know how much more relaxing I can do. You causing me anxiety by telling me to relax. But same, that's the same thing with breastfeeding. Not just as an FYI, but in that scenario, I feel like my thing is always like, what is it gonna hurt you to go get tested? Like, sure, you can relax, you can do all the things that your grandma and your great auntie do all those things. That's cool. But we got doctors for a reason. You got insurance for a reason. Just go check. And if your numbers are great, then good. At least now you know. And now you can rule that out. But right now is the time because you're gonna be fitting into the elderly. What do they call us?
The geriatric,
Geriatric.
the
Yeah,
geriatric.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You gonna fit into that geriatric pregnancy sooner than you think. And even if you didn't, like let's say you 20 something, at the end of the day, you should know what's going on with your body. You should, and you deserve to. It's your body. Just go ask.
I agree with that because my periods were always normal, so I just never know. I went and just did my yearly, and that was it. It wasn't until I was in my 40s that I actually had someone look at my ovaries, like look at my uterus, like look at everything. And so, I agree. In your 20s, you should at least have, at least during that time, maybe not every year, but every few years, have them look at your uterus, look at your ovaries, make sure that they don't see any cysts or anything like that. That you shouldn't have to be at a point where you're trying to conceive for them to automatically
Right,
start looking at things. So
right.
I think that's solid advice that you give to any woman who, even my 14-year-old, when we talked about her cycle and stuff, write it down because you can't advocate for yourself if you don't know everything that you
Mhm.
need to know. So advocating for yourself is very important, but you need to have the information to say, no, this is what happens
Right.
when I have X, Y, and Z, and now she tracks her own cycles. And I love that when she goes to the doctor and they go, when was your last period? She picks up her phone and she goes, I had it this day. And then they look at me and I go, she said what she said.
She was me looking at me.
Did you not hear what she said? She said it was this. And they're
Right.
like, oh, I was like, yeah, we've been told her. I told her to track her cycles, what to look for. And even like when she came to me, she said, um, she told me the color. She told me this. And I said, is this the first month this happened? And she said, yes. I said, well, we're not going to panic. We're just going to notate it. And if it happens again, then we'll keep an eye on it. She was being really active. She was doing cheerleading. I said, it just could be your body just in overdrive. We just
Hmm.
don't know. Um, and then somebody said, I just got diagnosed with PCOS. That's over 100K infertility treatments missed. I knew something was up. And exactly, um, there's so many things that can be, prevented or at least help the doctors make a better educated understanding if they have all the answers. So if you and why I wanted to highlight stories like Kelly is because she was younger. She didn't have anything blaring in their face, but now we're probably understanding that some genetic markers may be the reason behind her infertility. And honestly, we just still don't know. It's just still unexplained of why she couldn't
Right.
do it. Um, and then somebody said also advocate for yourself.
Hmm.
I didn't stop saying something's not right. And that's exactly what we teach our group of women as well is if it doesn't feel right, go to another doctor. You're a customer. And, sometimes and I even like Kelly, she didn't really talk about it, but in her story was um, of her just still seeing different specialists and going and moving around as much as she could, within her referrals of trying to just get to the right doctors in the right hands of who she liked and who she didn't like. When she was moving around, even though she was just like, forget it. She still did a good job of advocating for herself within the hands of being referred to here and being referred to there. I would say she said she wasn't doing, but the next morning she was on the phone calling X, Y, and Z
Still
people.
doing.
She was on it. She was calling everybody. They didn't call her back. They'd be like, we're gonna call you back in a few hours. She was like, okay. Um, an hour and 59 minutes. Y'all ain't called me back. Ma'am, we gonna call you back. We gonna call you back. But she was on it. She stayed on top of those people. And when she couldn't get those referrals, we was like, hey, you need to go and get those referrals. And she started getting on it and she started getting that stuff. And they started moving because they didn't want her to call no more.
Probably. But y'all sure okay girl me every time. Like, okay, girl. Because we know you finna call these people tomorrow.
Somebody said, might have saved thousands, got a black functional doctor. And whatever makes you feel better, to get the best answers for yourself and make you feel comfortable with it. I think that's what anybody should do. when you're going, especially when you're going through this journey, as Kelly said, it's very taxing, not only to your body, but to your mind. When you're going through this, because you're pumped up with so much medication, estrogen, progesterone. Some of us be on Lovenox, some of us on antibiotics, some of us on Lupron. Some of us are so many medications just to try to bring this baby home, that you want the right team behind you to at least help you mitigate all those things that you're going through.
I will say the one thing that helped, well, not the one thing, but one of the things that helped that I didn't realize at the moment was helping, that I went back and looked at it. My therapist said, "Why don't you start writing a journal about your journey, like what's happening, what's going through it?" And at first I was like, "I don't want to do that. That's
Right.
extra stuff. I don't want to keep talking about it or writing about it. I'm irritated." And then I just went back and found it the other day when I was cleaning up and I was reading it. And I was like, this, like, getting this out, I think is probably one of the reasons why the next day I was able to say, okay, you got through it. You complained about it. It's frustrating. I know. Let's go ahead and move forward. So, I mean, if anybody, I would suggest that as a good outlet too, or like blogs or YouTube channels or whatever helps you, Instagram, anything that helps you connect. Anyway, you got to write it down, complain, get it out. Please do that.
I definitely agree with that. This is the first time I've actually documented my journey, and I didn't realize how much I forget. And then I'll look back at the video and I'm like, oh dang girl, you
Hmm.
said a lot. Were you mad? I'm like, oh my gosh. So I definitely will agree with that. And because you do, I think mentally you have to just forget the trauma of things in order just to move forward. And so yeah, if you aren't documented, even if you don't show anybody, take a video of yourself like in the moment. You don't have to show anybody, you don't have to do that. But I think it is, and just put it in a folder of just your immediate feelings. Then even when I asked you guys, what was your AMH, like we all forget, like everybody forgets what their AMH is. You forget all the things, what medications you took, all those things. You just forget about it because you're like, okay, the baby is here or not here. And I don't remember, even when I try to think about my own journey from my first transfer to now, I'm like, girl, you should have wrote this down because I don't remember nothing.
There was stuff I was like, I forgot that happened.
Oh yeah, it was like, dang, that happened. Oh wow. I want to thank you, Kelly, so much for taking your time out. Um, and